CAT8
is a group of Jain individuals and professionals
who are assisting the community at large
during the COVID-19 crisis.
CAT8 began just before the COVID-19 crisis,
when it held a can challenge,
where children created iconic monuments
using cans of food. It raised some 3 tons of canned food,
enough supplies for 4 months.
For the Watford Food Bank,
run by the Trussell Trust.
During the COVID-19 crisis,
CAT8 is helping the elderly, the vulnerable,
those in isolation and key workers,
with meals and essential shopping,
help with medicine collection,
and someone to talk to,
whilst coping with isolation.
CAT8 is organising webinars,
imparting information and creating awareness.
A range of topics for all age groups.
In addition, we have created a business and education helpline
for individuals and businesses
that need further guidance
on the topics of all the webinars.
We also have a YouTube channel,
a Facebook page and a Twitter handle.
CAT8 is a newest network fibre,
connecting the community.
We are also very kindly and generously supported by a number of businesses to enable us to carry out our work. Our speaker today is Sanjay Jagatia, who is the Community Advisor for the Indian community in the UK for the Office for National Statistics, ONS, responsible for engaging the Indian community with the Census 2021. From a young age, Sanjay has been actively involved in the community through various leadership roles and instrumental in advancing the social, cultural, and business interests of the Indian community living in the UK. Sanjay's influence and flair has seen him become a well-respected and admired citizen and an ambassador for the Indian community. He is often the first point of contact by various government departments and statutory authorities to advise them and consult on issues, legislations, and policies affecting the Indian community in the UK. So I would like to hand over to Sanjay Jagatia.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you to CAT8 for giving us the opportunity today of telling you a little bit more about the Census 2021, which is only a few days away now. But just before I do that, just to set the scene, can I please show you a short video really about the contribution of the Indian community in the UK. Nirmal, can I pass that over to you?
A fairy book land of myths and veils, guarded by imposing castles, embodied by the crown. This tiny island that once ruled the world has had a complex relationship with India.
The Indian diaspora that makes an enormous contribution to Britain.
Indians are extremely good business people.
Indians has got a reputation in the UK for being successful, for studying, for being law-abiding.
We all came as a shopkeeper, and today we are hoteliers, manufacturers, in pharmacies, food. Indian diaspora has done very well.
The diaspora that have come from India into the United Kingdom have made a huge difference to this country. Quite literally, they've built cities with their hands, with their money, with their resources, with their talents, and with their skills.
In sports, in business, in art, you name it, Indians are reaching the very top. And that glass ceiling has been absolutely shattered.
Food, fashion, sport, culture, and even language have only blossomed from the ebb and flow. The give and take that has marked this very special bond between India and the United Kingdom. Keeping these historic relations going are Britain's Indians. The tiny Indian diaspora in UK, just 3% of the population, have long punched much above their weight. Their colors shimmer through the land. Their flavors spice every aspect of life in this country that's become home. These people that have become family.
When I started this company, I got my MBE from the Queen. Therefore, it's important to remember that if you work hard in this country, you are recognized.
Beyond building empires, the diaspora has developed a talent for giving back.
I think the Indian community has achieved so much in a very short space of time because, one, this is a culture that is strong and productive. Secondly, because they've been dedicated, hardworking, they've not relied on benefits.
With an economy devastated by war, suffering the loss of a significant proportion of its population, Britain appealed to men and women from across the empire to come rebuild factories, restart industry, and reignite the economy.
Britain actively encouraged migration to Britain to help rebuild the country after the end of the Second World War. Also to recruit doctors and nurses for the newly founded NHS, which happened in 1948.
Their toil reshaped Britain, and their success helped build the path to migration for the next wave of Indian immigrants who came here via Africa.
The real change took place when the East African Indians came. They went into small businesses, and then the children went into professions.
Thrown out of one country, determined to prove their worth in a new one, East African Indians worked long and hard, revolutionizing retail and offering much greater convenience to British consumers.
Sanjay, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for that. That was just to show you the contribution that we as Indians have made in this country over the last 40, 50, 60 years. And the whole point of today's presentation about the census is that we've done so much for the economy in the UK. We've done so much for the social and the cultural fabric of the UK. But what have we seen back in return from that? And I think today, with the census happening in the next 4 or 5 days' time on the 21st of March, this is our opportunity as a community to try and see how we can get something back from everything that we've actually put into the UK economy. So I want to take you through a short presentation about what the census is and why it's important for our communities to participate in this really, really important piece of work. The census is actually a survey that takes place every 10 years. So the last one was in 2011 and then 2001 prior to that. It's important because it gives us the most, or us as a government, local authorities, public sector, it gives us the most detailed information about our society in the UK. Everyone must complete the census. It's mandatory, and failure to complete the census form could lead to a fine of up to £1,000 and also a possible criminal record as well. Now, we've been trying to engage with the entire UK society, and just like myself, we have community advisors for different communities as well, and their role over the last 4 or 5 months, in fact, has been trying to engage with people to tell them that census is about to come, and we're actually now there, 1 week away, 5 days away. We're now towards Census Day. Your personal information that you actually put into the census is anonymous and it's secure as well. Before publishing any of the statistics, the Office for National Statistics will make sure that we delete everything that is of a personal nature to yourself and all of your personal information, and it won't go into the final data at all as well. The information that we collect in the census remains anonymous for 100 years, and this is protected by law. And the security aspect of your data is also protected by law. So ONS will also be breaking the law by actually accessing and giving that information out to any other statutory authorities. We are absolutely arm's length with the UK government, although we work with the UK government, so that none of the information that you put in there is ever going to be shared with any of the government departments, HMRC, landlords, whatever it may be, benefits offices. Nothing will be shared to anybody else from what you actually put inside the census data. So I can assure you that your information is very, very secure. And the fact that the Office for National Statistics, you see every day on the news at the moment with regards to the COVID-19 vaccinations, the number of deaths and so on and so forth. And we have been seeing that over the last 12 months. All the daily statistics that you are seeing is actually provided by the Office for National Statistics, which is a data agency, the topmost data agency, not just in the UK, but probably across the world as well. Why do we have a census? Now, the census is very, very important, and it helps central government. It also helps local authorities and city councils and county councils, as well as charities and the public sector, to decide how billions and billions of pounds of public funding is spent right across England and Wales. It also gives us information that we need for government and MPs and politicians to shape policy and legislation, to allocate resources according to what each community's needs are, and also to plan and run services, and more than anything else, to monitor equality as well and diversity in the UK. The census informs decisions that absolutely improve our lives. And by taking part in the census, you'll be making sure that our community gets the services and the needs now and also in the future. And there's some examples there. One of the key things that the census is used for is planning and development. It's to understand, as I mentioned, ethnic diversity, and also ensuring that resources are in place to make sure that all our communities and groups are treated equally. Public health and social care. Census information is decided and used to decide and also inform demand, like in hospitals and doctor surgeries, and also identify pockets of health deprivation and support future planning. So a really good example of this has been over the last 12 months with the COVID-19 virus, and the fact that the Indian community and also the BME community, we have been disproportionately been affected by the coronavirus than any other community right across the UK. And had we known about this, actual resources would have been put forward for our communities to make sure that they get the tests and traces done a lot earlier than they did. Also the vaccination program that's going on at the moment. All this would be due to service demand and how much allocation of funds were actually set aside for those communities. Education is another key area as well, is to decide if there's more schools that are needed in our areas, including faith schools as well. So you've seen a few Indian and Hindu faith schools right across the country. If there's a demand for that, local authorities can start to implement the idea of having further faith schools, and not just faith schools, but normal primary schools and secondary school, because you've seen that over the last 10 years in particular, so many more people are now living in the UK due to migration. So there will be obviously a need for further schools in the area, and that's what's actually determined from the census. Also housing as well, to better understand and assess all the housing needs that people have. Are there a lot more people in our cities and towns at the moment than there was 10 years ago? As a result of that, is new complexes and housing needs and houses need to be built as well. And also the cost of living as we have on today's society. Are the houses that we're actually having on the market affordable for people right across society as well? Transport, for those of you in particular in London, to decide if there is more tube services that are required, more bus services that are required, and also for all of us across the country as well, that nowadays when you look outside of your house, you can hardly ever find a parking space just for your own car, let alone anybody else's car that may come and visit you. So is there a need to have widening of roads, having more car parking spaces? All this information is actually decided for the census over the next 10 years. The next census actually takes place on Sunday, the 21st of March 2021. So we're really about 4 days away from that now. And it's for the first time we're actually doing the census on a digital first. So it's actually going to be available to people simply by going onto an internet, onto the census website, and you can actually click on that and you'll be able to complete your census. The census for people who do it online takes approximately 10 to 15 minutes to actually complete the actual, the whole of the census. And what we've been doing as far as the ONS is concerned is to try and engage and focus our engagement with those underrepresented and hard to reach groups, and providing them with guidance and support in many languages and formats. And that's what we've been doing over the last 8-9 weeks now, to try and get the message across to those underrepresented communities as well. Census online is really, really quick and easy. As you can see there, you can do it on your mobile phone. You can do it actually on your laptop, your iPads, and also your computers as well. And the beauty about doing it online is that you can start the census and then, you know, you can pause it, save it, and then come back to it a few hours later and carry on from where you left off. Or you can come back the following day as well, as long as you do it before the 21st of March, and you can keep coming back until you're happy with the information that you put on there before you actually submit it in your own time. So that's the beauty about doing this online. Having said that, there's also paper copies for those of us who are not knowledgeable on the internet and who wants to have a paper copy. You can actually request a paper copy simply by actually sending an email or using our phone number, and a paper copy will be sent to your home as well. On top of the help that you get on our website, we also have a dedicated language helpline as well, 0800 587 2021. And this is manned by all our staff and colleagues at the moment, and they will be able to speak in any language that you wish them to speak in. So, for example, Gujarati, Hindi, Punjabi, Bengali, Urdu, Romanian, Polish, whatever language, up to 58 languages. We have phone operators who will be able to go through the census form with you and answer any of the questions that you may have about filling in the census form online, or even the paper copy as well. Collecting inaccurate and incomplete data will always mean that government and local authorities cannot plan for our community's needs. And just a snapshot of the type of activities, what communities do on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, year-to-year basis, through our festivals and our activities. And yet, you know, when I've been speaking to people from the Indian community and saying to them, well, you know, you do you have singing, you have Navratri, do you have, you know, religious festivals that you celebrate, and what kind of funding have you received as a result of that? And the answer has always been either very little or none at all. And I think this is one of the key things that I want to go through the presentation today, to make sure that we as the Indian community are fully represented, and that we actually get what's actually owed to us as well, as far as the other communities are concerned. Excuse me. The census form has 4 sections. The first one is the introduction and declaration, and very much about what the census is in, and you have to declare that you understand that. The second part of the questionnaire is about your accommodation details, the type of property you have, if you own that property, if it's a rented accommodation. The third part is where the individual questions come, and that is personal details about each and every person in the household. And that includes, you know, your husband, wife, sons and daughters, parents if they live with you as well, and anybody else that will be living with you. Their information needs to go onto the census form. Also your country of birth, your qualifications, your employment details, the type of employment that you have, what your general health is like at this moment in time, what ethnic group you belong to, what religion do you follow, what type of job you have, and how you travel on a day-to-day basis as well. All that individual questions. You're probably wondering, why do you need to know this? And the thing is, this is also another way of us planning, and local authorities and government planning the needs. For example, for the public sector, they use the census information to find out if they need to actually build a factory, for example, in the UK, and to determine where people are there who can actually take on apprenticeships, who can actually work if the unemployment is high in that area. So a lot of things actually make up about how census is used. The general health question as well, you know, to actually foresee what may happen in the next 10 years for those who have got long-term health conditions, about what can be put in place for you going forward for the next 10 years as well. The final part of the question is about if the details of any visitors that you may have living at your house on Sunday, 21st of March, 2021. So if you do have any relatives who may have come from India, America, Africa, wherever they may come, and they're visiting you at the moment and they're staying in your house, you do need to actually put their information into the census form that you've actually got as well. Because what we try and do, we choose the 21st of March, and that's the day that we will take a snapshot, almost like taking a photograph of the entire country. And that is what the census is based on, about what is actually happening in the UK on that particular day. This is just a chart here to show you the response rate of the census in 2011. And this is broken down by religion. So you can see there that the Christian community, those who ticked that they were Christian as a faith, there was a very good response rate from the Christian community of 95% of people actually filled in the census form on time, on the time it was meant to be done. The Muslim community, again, very high percentage of 94% of the Muslim population actually took part in the census in 2011. The Hindu community, 80% of the Hindu community took part in the census, Sikh 74, and the Buddhist community 73. So that just shows you 10 years ago, the response rates of those by particular religions who took part in the census. 10 years ago, the census also asks you what your ethnicity is. And as you can see from this chart here, that the Indian community, the one in red, in 2011, the census captured 1,412,000 people who identified themselves as being Indian on the actual census form and who actually took part in the census. Now, this is really, you can see the figures here are very, very mangled up in such a sense, because we know, and our estimates have shown, that there are over 2.5 million Indians living in the UK, and yet, less than, or just over half of them have actually filled out the census form identifying themselves as being Indian. So I think we've been trying to raise this figure up somewhat to actually truly show the amount of Indian community that we actually have living in the UK. On the actual census questionnaire, there are over 30 questions, as I mentioned to you earlier on, but there are 3, 4, 5 major questions that actually determine what we as communities will get back in response to resources, funding, and benefits as well from taking part in the census, not just for ourselves, but for our communities as well. One of the questions that it asks you on the actual questionnaire is that, what is your national identity? Now, this is a question where they're asking you as an individual, how would you best describe your national identity? And this relates to where you feel that you belong to, such as a country or countries that you think of as home. So again, this same question would have actually happened in the last census. And I think people got confused with this question because they thought they were asking us, what color passport do we have? If it's purple, then you're a British citizen, or what does it say inside your passport, British citizen? So they may have ticked the British box only, but not realizing that this is asking you how you would best describe your identity. So I just give you an example here, that if this was me, and the best example I can give you, if it was me that was filling out this form, I would first of all tick the box which says British, simply because I've lived here for the last 40, 50, 55 years since I moved over from Uganda. I see Britain as being my home. I'm a very proud British person, but at the same time, my home is also not back in Uganda, but my home is back in my roots, which was India. So I would actually tick British, then other, which will then take you onto the right-hand section of the page, which says you selected other. How would you describe your nationality? And this is where I would either type in Indian or write in Indian if you were using a paper copy. So this particular page will then identify me as being a British Indian. And again, you could do exactly the same kind of thing, however it relates to you, British, other. If you felt that you were African, you can put Africa. If you felt that you're from Pakistan or Bangladesh or whichever country you see as your roots, that's where you put down your national identity. And this plays a very key role in the overall scheme of the census, because again, it identifies how many from each ethnicity are actually living in this country, and the identities that we carry with us. So it helps with things like foreign policy as well in future, and that type of thing with regards to how many people are living in here who can go back to their houses as well, or homes in different countries. The other group, the other question is what ethnic group you belong to. So again, you have a selection of 5 answers, whether you're white, mixed or multiple ethnic groups, Asian or Asian British, Black or Black British Caribbean, or any other ethnic group. So again, if it was me who was filling out this form, I would be ticking the Asian box, the Asian, because it includes that category of the Asian ethnic group, includes Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladesh, Chinese, and any other Asian background. So I would tick the Asian and Asian British box, which will then straight away take me to the other side of the page, where you've got a list of Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh, and Chinese, or any other Asian background. So in my case, I'd be ticking the Indian box. So this would make my ethnic group as being Asian, but the sub part of that would be that I'm actually Indian within the Asian group. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this, the way that all communities, are classed as being Asian, for example, whether you're Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh, or Chinese. And there's been a concerted effort, and I know this for the last 10, 12 years, from the Indian community in particular, that, we want to be identified as being Indians. We don't want to be identified as being Asian and being grouped up as a BME or BAME group or an Asian group, but we want to have a particular identity as being Indian. And the reason why this happens is that when you see the BBC News, when you see newspapers and anything that happens which is really bad in the UK, things like what may have happened in Rotherham with the Rotherham gangs and the rape against young girls and all the rest of it, every media carried that story as being this was carried out by a group of Asian men. Now, when we go out, people say, well, they look at us and they think that we're all the same, because we come from this Asian category. And that's one of the reasons why, people have been saying, no, we want to remove ourselves from this just ethnic group of being Asian, but continue calling ourselves either Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh, or Chinese, or whatever ethnic group we have. So this is your choice, that you can actually choose whichever question best relates to you. The third question that we have is about what is your religion? And it's quite ironic, really, because this particular question in the census, a lot of the questions that you have on the census are mandatory, that you have to fill in, and it won't let you go any further until you've actually put some answer on that box. But this particular question is a voluntary question, so you don't have to fill this in if you don't wish to. And I think when I showed you the slide previously about the response rates from the various faith communities, this could well have been why perhaps the Hindu and the Buddhist and the Jain sections were so low, because people may have thought that, well, it's a voluntary question, I don't need to fill it in. But it's really important. If you want to be identified as a Hindu, for example, you need to tick the Hindu box. If you want to be identified as a Buddhist, tick the Buddhist box. Jewish, Muslim, and Sikh, and so on. On this occasion, if you want to be actually your tick box or considered or identified as being a Jain, what you need to do there is to actually tick the other, and it will take you to another page and another box where you can actually write Jain as well, because the Jain community have been doing a very large, very successful, and I must say that a very template community engagement exercise with regards to the census, and the way that the Jain community have really managed to get the message out to the community has been absolutely fantastic. And I've been ranting and raving about it to all my other colleagues as well, about how such a template campaign it has been. So again, if you're a Jain and you want to be identified as Jain, it's other, tick other, and write in Jain on this religion question. The other one is about your main language. And again, what this confuses a lot of people, that it's probably the way that the questionnaire has actually been written is, what is your main language? And the fact that I'm speaking in English today and you're speaking back to me in English, automatically it would be assumed that my main language is English. And I think that's what a lot of people did last time as well, to tick that box. But having said that, what this question actually means, and when you look at it, the connotations of why this question is being put in there, is that I would actually go in and now, I mean, I know I ticked British and English last time, but this time around, I would make sure I tick other. And where it says you've selected other, I would actually write down in my case that I'm a Gujarati. So my mother tongue language or my main language would be Gujarati, because the following question that comes after this asks you, how well do you speak English? So the English side of that is already been sort of tick box in the next question that comes. And, you know, you can select whether you speak it very well, quite well, or not at all well. So you can tick that according to how your main language is as far as English is concerned. But this particular page is so important because what happens here is that we have an aging community, an aging population in the UK, and people are living a lot longer. And so people like my mother, who can't speak English, who can't read English, she can read Gujarati, for example. And what's happened is that you're seeing that letters that used to come from the hospital, the city councils, central government, and all the other things used to in the old days be translated into various languages, or definitely the main 9 languages that we use here in the UK. And that's over a period of time that stopped happening. So in this way, we can actually then go and lobby with government and parliament and local authorities and councils to say that we need to have our information also translated into our mother tongue language, and Gujarati, in my case, Hindi, Punjabi, whatever it may be, that's what you need to put down there as being your mother tongue language. So that's why the importance of this particular question. How the census has helped various communities in the past. Now, not just local authorities and government, but also charities and voluntary organizations use the census data as evidence to get funding, to campaign, and also to lobby as well. So some really good examples here. In 2001, the Muslim Council of Britain, they used the census data. So 20 years ago, they identified that there was going to be an aging population in their community. And they picked that up 20 years ago. And as a result of that, they lobbied Department for Health and other government departments to ensure that they secured Muslim healthcare chaplains in most of the hospitals around the country, and also to make sure that there were funeral and crematoria provisions that is made for their funeral when they have their funerals inside cemeteries. The Jewish community also last year, so from 2011, started to analyze that they too had an aging population. So they wanted to make sure that there was enough Jewish care homes that were built to be able to look after the elderly population for residential care, and at the same time also for Jewish funeral provision as well. The Jain community, I know that for this time round, you've successfully seen that the Jain community, whenever you go abroad anywhere and you want to go on an airline, you ask for a vegetarian meal and you get a Jain meal. So that's really brilliant lobbying done over many, many years. From your leaders in the community who have done that very, very successfully. And I know that this time round, they want to be able to lobby for Jain healthcare chaplains inside hospitals, also to make sure that Jainism is taught appropriately in schools, in RE books, and also, a picture there, who knows, in future, vegetarian Jain meals in trains, and very, very definitely that in the next year or two, we should be starting to think about vegetarian meal options inside primary schools and also secondary schools as well, because at the moment, that provision is not there. You either have a choice of a Western meal or you have a choice of a halal meal. There's nothing in between. So we can see that there is a provision and a resource that must be carried out, whereby we want to have a vegetarian meal, and it could well be that the Jain community take on this initiative, to ensure that the Jain meals are actually served inside schools as well, and in hospitals. For those of us who have been unfortunate to have hospital stays, over a period of 2, 3, 4, 5 days stay, they give you a menu: breakfast, lunch, and evening meal. And you say you're a vegetarian, which I am, and the choice is you either have a Western meal or you have a halal meal. And if you're a vegetarian, you get a jacket potato, they put some cheese in there with some butter in there, or they give you an afternoon, they give you a cheese and cucumber sandwich. There is no provision whatsoever for a vegetarian Indian meal. So again, that's something that I know that the Jain community are going to be using as a lobbying campaign tool after the census data comes out. I've got a little bit of a thing there about Ekta Unity serving the elderly community. I'm a bit biased about this. This is a charity that I run in Coventry, where I live, and it serves elderly Asian women. And we have about 300 women who regularly use our services. We started off by doing 1 day a week, but we're now running services 5 days a week, and we do luncheon clubs, singing, dancing, knitting, everything that we do there. And I use the census data, and I have been doing for the last 10, 15 years, to be able to attract funding from local authorities and grant-making authorities as well. And today, you know, Ekta Unity, which is what my charity is called, we have over 11 members of staff who are support workers. We have a CEO who is a paid worker, and all of our activities are funded, you know, by various sources. So you can see there that once you can show from the census that we have X amount of people living in our area that will be able to use our services, you'll be able to attract that funding. I looked at what CAT8 did, and you know, the video that you showed earlier on as well, and you said that you were helping to feed the underprivileged during, and you still are, COVID-19. Did you know that there was over £20 million that the government set aside to help organizations that were actually feeding the vulnerable during COVID-19? And again, we as an Indian community, either we're not smart enough or we don't know how to do this, that other communities were using that funding to be able to do exactly what we did. And I know we can always go back to say, well, you know, we're a voluntary organization and we do this because it's part of our seva. But, you know, why can't we get what's actually owed to us as well, just like every other community is getting? So this is just a shift that I want you to start thinking about as well, that the money is there, the funding is there, it's how we actually unravel it and show that we have a need for that as well. The benefits of the census also providing new community centers and charitable projects, very similar to what you do. If there's a need for funding for temples, gurdwaras, etc., you know, planning approval that's needed, census data is used for all of that. So if you wanted to say, for example, build a, I don't know, a Jain temple in Coventry, the first thing the local authority will do is that, is there a large Jain community in the Coventry area? If there is, fine. If there isn't, is there a wider Indian community that will also be able to use the Jain centers or the Jain temple? And that's how the funding and allocation is actually worked on. So all those 4 questions I told you about, you can see gradually how it fits into how we should be looking at funding. Healthcare, you know, our community, again, we are affected disproportionately due to diabetes, cancer, heart problems, those type of long-term treatments that we need as a community and our elders need as a community. We need to actually start to put that down on our census so that provisions and resources are actually allocated as a result of that as well. And that's one of the questions where it says about your general health as well within the actual census form. Also, council funding for suitable care homes. Who knows? You know, we have an Asian community. Do we want to have a Jain care home? Do we want to have a Hindu care home? So that at least our people who are in those care homes are amongst people of their own community. They can eat the food and make the food that's there for our community as well. So I think take a leaf out of what the Muslim and the Jewish community have done, and they've been planning for this 10 years and 20 years before, as you've seen from the previous census, and it's not too late for us. So that, you know, 2021, if that is something that we want to do as a community, we need to start to look at that right now. Some of the activities that we already do as a community should be attracting local authority funding. But again, like I said to you, that a lot of our communities do this on a voluntary basis, on a seva basis, because it's part of our religion and dharma, as we would call it, that this is why we do it and we do it. So for example, how many yoga classes have you seen happening online during the last 12 months? When before COVID, these yoga classes used to happen inside temples and community centers. Other communities get funding to actually run yoga sessions because it's called a well-being activity, and it's part of one of the government's top priorities to be able to look after the well-being of our society. So again, things that we already may do day to day and have been doing for years, start thinking about how they can actually be turned into a resource mechanism for us. Like I mentioned to you, luncheon clubs. A lot of us do this, and a lot of us call it prashadi as well. You know, we have a religious event, and we have a meal for everybody that comes there, and we do it for a religious reason. But luncheon clubs is another area where if you are doing this, and in your case with CAT8, you may not be calling people to have lunch with you, but you're actually giving out that lunch to other people. So that should be attracting funding for you as well. Like I said, I use this really well. We have a funding for a luncheon club that happens, 5 days a week. And, in some cases, our Asian, Indian men and ladies who live on their own or live in care homes and who come to our activities, this hot meal that we provide them is probably the only hot meal that that individual has right throughout the day. Because you can imagine at the age of 60, 70, 80, 90, they don't have the facilities to be able to cook every day just for one person. And the fact that we have these luncheon clubs, they can have a full vegetarian meal, hot vegetarian, nutritious, they can have that and then go home, and in the evening they don't have to worry about having another hot meal unless they want to. Satsangs and prayers and other musical activities that we do it on a day-to-day basis, but we've never thought about the need that if you sell this concept to a funder, you sell this concept to the local authorities, that by having these religious activities and satsangs that we have, you can see on the picture there, a group of very young people and a group of very old people. And they're the two demographics, again, that the government is trying to get people out of isolation, loneliness that they feel, and where they can do that is these type of activities. So we're doing the government's job for them as well by doing something which, again, you'll say we've been doing this for years and centuries, but let's start thinking about how funding should actually be given for this, youth activities that we may be doing as well, men's activities. We've talked about women activities, but what about men? Our aging men also have a need as well to be able to get out of the isolation and the loneliness that they do. And it's a fact, it's been proven that a lot from the Indian community, the men who retire, who lose their jobs and they retire, they don't have anything else to do, unfortunately that they go into drinking alcohol, and alcoholism comes into it. As a result of that, you've got domestic abuse in the family, you've got all sorts of mental issues that happen as well. So what can we do to try and make sure that our elderly men as well have some kind of activities that they can do, whether it's in our temples or whether it's in our community centers as well? Zoom calls, and CAT8 has been doing Zoom calls for the last 12 months. Other communities are getting funding to actually do their Zoom calls, because again, what you're doing is you're interacting, you're celebrating, occasions that you're doing, you're giving good information about various topics as well. This is exactly the kind of thing that the government is looking for us as communities to be able to share to our own communities. And you've seen that more and more now over the last few months with regards to the COVID vaccine, how they're using us as community leaders to be able to get that message across to our communities. That attracts funding as well. So think about that as well. Things like Gujarati classes, Sanskrit classes, Bhagavad Gita classes, all this comes under the education bracket, whether we may be doing it once a week, on a Sunday in the temple or a hall somewhere. This is again counted part of the education curriculum as well in the UK. So again, should be attracting local authorities to actually fund us for those activities. Just to quickly go through the timeline of the census, 21st of March 2021, Census Day. We're almost there where that red line is. What happens after that? If you still haven't filled out your census form, between the 22nd of March and the 1st of April, you'll get a first letter as a reminder that you haven't done the census. If you still haven't done anything after that, the following week, and these are very crucially timed, by the way, the following, you'll get a reminder letter number 2. And at this stage, the field census officer will start knocking on your doors, obviously COVID restrictions as well, to tell you that you haven't still filled in your census form. And you'll get one final reminder between the 16th and the 19th of April, a reminder letter to say that you still haven't filled your census form. And then unfortunately, non-compliance actually kicks in from towards the end of April for those who haven't filled out the census form or refuse to fill out the census form. And this is where the fines of £1,000 and a possible criminal record as well, because you will be taken to court as a result of this, will come in. So let's make sure that our community is not the community that has large amounts of fines from this. Most of you, as Rumit said earlier on, you must have received this letter that's come through the post. The key thing here is that red 16-digit code. That code is unique to each and every household in the UK. So no same code will be for two people at all in the entire UK. You need this code to be able to go onto the website, the Census website, www.census.gov.uk. Once you go into that website, start the census, and as soon as you start the census, it will ask you for the 16-digit code, which is again unique to yourself, and you'll be able to start to fill out the census form straight away. And like I said, it takes you between 10 and 15 minutes to fill in. I actually filled in mine yesterday evening, and it took me something like 12-13 minutes, and I have 4 people who, my 2 sons and my wife. So, you know, on average for 4 people's information on the census form, it should take you about 15 minutes to fill that in. Also on the website, for those of us who want to have text in different languages, after every question, on the right-hand side of it, you have a help box, and you can click that help box, and in 48 different languages, you can have that question translated into any of the languages that you want to. So, you know, again, you can have it in Gujarati, Hindi, whatever it may be, you can actually have that language, and it will come up as a text box, clearly showing you what that question means. And again, if you want to have that help over the phone, the 0800 587 2021 is the telephone number that somebody will be able to speak to you on the other side of the phone as well, for any queries that you may have about the census. There's never been a more important time for our community to come together. And I've been speaking to so many groups and organizations, temples and charities in the last 8 months. My team of community advisors have been doing the same thing. And one thing that we've learned is that we don't seem to have the problem that other faith communities have. In fact, when we sit around, you know, on our Zoom meetings on a Monday with all my other colleagues from the other community advisors from the other faiths, they laugh at me. And I used to wonder why they used to do that to me. And it was because when I tell them that we've done over 218 Zoom calls in the space of about 7 weeks between ourselves, and telling people that please, you know, tick the Hindu box, tick the Jain box, tick the Indian identity box, tick the Asian box, they laugh at us. And when we say why that is, it was only until recently they said, well, you know, I'm from the Pakistani community. We never ever have to tell any of our community to tick the Muslim box, because they would do it automatically. The Christian community said, the guy said to me, we never need to tell the Christian community that please tick the Christian box, because they will do it automatically. We seem to be the only faith community that has been going around almost to the stage of begging people that to take part in the census and telling them, please tick the right religion box, tick the Indian box, because as a result of that, we'll get, you know, the resources that we want. But should it not be automatic that you'd be a proud Jain, you'd be a proud Hindu, you'd be a proud Indian, and you'd want to put that onto your census box, and you'd want to tell the world about it? It's just something strange that, you know, we seem to be disjointed as a community in that way, unlike any other community. If we want to uphold our culture, values, religion, identity, and be represented and be counted, this is our chance. We've got to do it on the 21st of March, so that we can't say that over the last 10 years, we've not received anything. Over the last 20 years, we've not received anything, because we haven't actually asked in the right way and we made ourselves being represented in the right way. If after the census and nothing happens for us even after that, then at least we can go back to the local authorities and say, there are so many Indians, there's 2.5 million Indians, there are 50,000-60,000 Jain community in the UK, there are 1 million Hindus in the UK. What are you doing for us? What has our community got from us? But you can't do that unless you've got the data to be able to show to the local authorities. So please, a lot of people say to me, Sanjay, I'm 70, 80, 90 years old. What on earth is the census going to do for me in the next 10 years? You know, I may not even be alive in 10 years' time. And my simple answer to that is, okay, if you feel that the census is not going to do anything for you, at least make your choice today that will leave a legacy for our sons and daughters and our grandchildren, so that they don't have to go through what we, as that second generation of Indians who have come into this country, have had to go through. We've had the patience, we've had the voluntary time to do what we do. Do we really think that our children, the third generations, are going to have the time and the patience that we have had to build temples and to build community centers and to go to individual houses with their hands wide open and saying, please, can you give me £1,000? Please, can you give me £5,000? I want to build a temple, because that's how we do it. And yet other communities, you know, you'll give it a classic example. You want to build a masjid, 3 months, you'll get planning permission. In 1 year, that masjid is built. The same with churches. 3-4 months, you get planning permission. 1-2 years, the church is built. For a Hindu or a Jain temple to be built, first of all, it takes us about 1.5 years to get the planning permission. And then it takes us 5 years after that before the actual temple is built. And yet, you know, we look at how other communities do it because they're able to show that there is a need for that temple or that masjid or that church in the area that they're actually building that on. And we've got to start to look at it that way. So please, let's leave a legacy for those behind us if we don't feel that the census is going to be any use to us. But it should be used to you because, again, you know, like I said, we've got an aging population. So we're going to be needing a lot of the stuff that we are not getting at the moment going forward as well. That's it from me about the census, and I'll pass over now back to Rumit to take over. Thank you very much.
Okay, question and answers. Nirmal, I think you had a question. Perhaps you want to kick off. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, a few, Rumit. So I'll basically kick off. But before that, Sanjay, absolutely brilliant presentation. And actually good highlight of why the census is important. Just delving into a couple of the questions that have come through. I've got a question. My son is in Canada for 2 years on contract. He will be back to London in June or July 2021. Should I include him in the form because it says specifically the data should be as of the 21st of March? So yeah.
So I think the answer to that is that if your son has been coming back to the UK regularly over the last 2 years and he hasn't been away from the UK for more than 1 year in any given period, then yes, you need to actually put him down on your census form. If for this reason, if you're saying that he's been in Canada for 2 years and he hasn't come back to the UK and he's not likely to be in the UK on the 21st of March, then you know you don't need to put his details down on there.
Okay. Rumit?
Yeah, sure. Again, Sanjay, you mentioned, you know, where you fill in the form about, sorry, I've just taken the other slide off, where people say they're British and then we should put other and Indian. Obviously, this would apply to a lot of people. When you talk to people, a lot of people actually have the overseas citizen of India, passport or whatever, OCI, right? And I presume in that scenario, you should always do what you were suggesting, have British and then have other and then go to Indian.
Yeah, and I think that the thing about this question is that it's really funny the way the question has been put down. It's actually saying to you, what do you see as your identity? So the question is being thrown back at us. And the reason why I presume that this question has been put in is because of probably the lobbying that's happened over the last 10, 15 years as to not wanting to be identified as an Asian, for example, but want to have a specific demographic as being Indian. And that's why this time is, the question is being worded in that way. Who knows, the next census, it would actually be a lot more stronger. Like an example, which is slightly different, Rumit, is that the Jain community have been fighting to have, or lobbying and campaigning to have Jainism as being listed as one of the religions, and rightly so. But the fact of the matter is that because census happened before all of that went through, otherwise, you would have seen Jainism being part of the religion there, and you wouldn't have to go through the boxes and say, okay, I'm going to tick the other and then have to write Jain. it would have been there automatically. And the same is for the identity question, but it's definitely as a result of a lot of lobbying that's happened that, for us as Indians, and just like us, probably other communities have also said, we want to come out of this BAME bracket, Asian bracket, and have our own demographic on there. But please don't confuse it with your passport, because it's not asking you, because there is another question within the form saying, are you a British citizen? So that's where you'll be able to answer that. But I didn't include them in those 4 questions because it's just one of those questions that you'd fill in anyway, whichever your nationality is as far as your citizenship. But this is simply asking you what you feel is you want to be identified as, and it's a very open-ended question. No, there's no right answer to this.
Emil? I think
yeah, thanks, Ramit. So, Sanjay, just one other question. I'm actually gonna. The question is there's 2 questions. I'll just take both of them together. So, if a property is vacant and has received the form, and it's vacant because obviously over the last sort of year or whatever they haven't had tenants in or anything like that, and then obviously because of the pandemic stretching out over a period and everything will be relaxed from June onwards, if the required information is not submitted within that time frame, how do they deal with vacant properties?
Right, so we have a separate team altogether. I mean, ONS has recruited over 38,000 people to work on the census. It's one of the biggest projects of its kind. And there's a separate team that are looking at those vacant properties. But the key thing here is that if you say that it's been vacant because there's somebody lives there, but for the period of the lockdown or whatever, for example, they're not living there and they may be living with their parents, in which case, because that house still belongs to you, whether it's rented or if you own it, you are liable to fill in that information for that house. But because you're living with your mother on the 21st of March, you can put your details in your mother and father's census form, so it will be actually captured in there, because it also says what is your normal living address. So if you include it in that form, it also says what is your normal living address, and that's where you can actually put down the other address you have. But if a property is vacant and there's nobody living and there's no contract for anybody to live there and it's a rented accommodation, then the landlord is actually liable for that information for that particular household. And how they would capture that is that where they normally live, the question will also be, do you have any other houses? And he or she would have to declare that he's got 2 or 3 rented houses wherever it may be. So that's how it sort of covers itself.
Okay, so just going back to that question, Sanjay, just the clarification was, you get a form per household at the moment. Now, if the landlord fills it for the property that he's living at, plus the properties that he has for rent, they're not. So basically, whatever he's filled in for the rental properties is actually included into the census. So the rented properties do not then need to have that specific entry back in again. So they don't need to go back to the rented properties and do that.
I think just to clarify there that, the other thing as well is that if there is somebody living in the rented property, then the landlord won't be filling that information in about that rented property, because that's somebody who's living there at the moment. It's only when that property is empty that the landlord will need to include that as being another house that he has, but nobody living in there.
All right. So that just leads me on to the next question. So if a property is rented and obviously whoever the tenants are decide not to fill in the census for whatever reason, in the end, let's say if they abscond or vacate that property at any point after the census date, who's liable again for not filling in that census form?
This question has been given to me yesterday as well, and I've got to be very honest with you that it's a question that I don't have an honest answer for, and I'm not going to try and fluff the answer either. It's a really good question that I should have actually tried to get some help on that, but that is a really crucial question. That what would happen at the time of court proceedings, if any, if that person who is renting it is not there? My guess would be it will still be liable for the person who is living there, but I do need to check that and certainly come back to you on that.
Okay. Rohit?
Okay, yeah. Just in terms of how this census has got the questions, one of the things you mentioned was about the main language and how you wanted to use, you would have filled it into saying, forget English, but it's other and Gujarati. Obviously, for our second generation, third generation, the kids, a lot of them, their main language and the first language is English. They may have second language in terms of they may speak it, but they may not be able to read it in terms of Gujarati. Now, in terms of the form, why doesn't the form actually ask for whatever your first language is? Do you have a second language? Because that way, at least you can say that my second language is this, but my first language is English, and my second language is Gujarati or whatever. That way, at least you could actually put it down much more clearly.
Yeah.
And for some of these young people, it would be very difficult otherwise when you think about that.
Very true. And I think that question, what it is, after that question where it says, what's your mother tongue language? The next question that comes on, it says, how well do you speak English? So perhaps it should have been the other way around. But, remember, this is one of the key things that if you don't mind, I wanted to talk to you guys about that. The way that these census forms are put together, and for that matter, however legislation and policy, for those of us who know how governments work and local authorities work, they need to have engagement with communities to be able to put the framework of such a thing like a census paper, like, for example, legislation, the framework of a legislation that ultimately ends up being policy. If we're not sitting around that round table, what input have we had in that as a community with governments and with local authorities, for that matter? I've been working in this field for a good 25 years. And sometimes, Rumit, I feel like I'm the lone wolf. It's not a one-man job. It's not a two-man job. We've got that many intelligent, knowledgeable people in our Indian community that why are they not elevating themselves to be advising and providing this resource to central government, local authorities and that? That is where we lack as a community. And I'm talking of the general Indian community. I'm not talking about just the Jain community or the Hindu community. Generally, the Indian community do not have, this interaction with national government on these type of things. Census form, 18, 20 months ago, this was put together, and there should have been a round table where people engage and look at the questions, how they were going to be put and all the rest of it. I can't remember very many people from the Indian community sitting around the table with the ministers when this was going to be put together. It's you're talking of a project which is probably going to reach about £1 billion by the time the census is finished. It's not any old, it's a massive project, but you need to have engagement with the community. And that's where we as a community need to step up. They're not going to come and look for us. We need to sort of like, I remember, and I say this all the time, Swami Vivekananda said, give me 100 people and I will change the world. All I'm saying to you guys, let's just get 10 great Indian community people together and we'll change the lifestyle of Indians in the UK by having them working in that national level. All we need is 10 good people.
Part of the equation, if I may retort to that as well, is that, like, for example, if I or Nirmal, we're very keen people wanting to do some of the stuff, but sometimes we're not even aware of what is happening, how we can get involved. And, it's not exactly very easily publicized to people that we are looking for this sort of input from people. Many times you could effectively, if there was a bit of communication where you could actually find, we would be very happy to help the government on a lot of things. But unless you know that there is something going on and they can publicize it so people can apply for helping, sometimes it's very difficult to know that and how you get onto that. It's a two-way street to an extent. But I agree that, we do tend to have this Indian scenario where we tend to be much more passive. Sometimes we tend to be a bit more, let's just get on with our lives, get on with our careers, get on with the work that we are doing. But I think this generation, maybe the next generation and the generations after, I think things are changing, and they would be interested if they knew the medium how to get there. I think that's the other optionality there.
And I think that the next generation, they won't tolerate what's happened to us. Like you've just mentioned about not being involved and not being told in the community. Our next generation is not going to tolerate that. You know, because like, as you said, communication should work both ways. And I think that, I mean, just looking at the projects that you did, just by that short video you showed, and I'm going back to the last 12 months where there's been roundtable meetings with government ministers from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, who are talking about the COVID feeding and all those, and they were meant to have the experts around the table to be able to work with the government to see how we can enhance this. I cannot remember, or I can't remember CAT8 being mentioned anywhere in those roundtable meetings.
Exactly.
And yet, when I look at what you guys have just done, my goodness me, you know, you talk about a template, talk about the way things should be done. So this is what we've got to change. We have to change this.
I agree. Nirmal?
Yeah. So, Sanjay, just one other question which comes back is, after the 21st of March, we're going to go into a period where there'll be reminders and various other things happen, and that will then lead to a fine. But what a concern that has come up is that how do people know what is going to be a legitimate request from the ONS on behest of Census 2021 and what could be fake? So is there any sort of identifiers that people can pick up? So in effect, I would have filled my form in, but someone then calls me and says, you haven't filled your form in and you need to do this now. And being naive and worried about £1,000 fine landing because I haven't submitted the data, I may actually get scared and give the data out. So is there anything that we, as the people who are filling in the forms, be aware of on what is legitimate and what may be someone trying to extract information like data theft?
Yeah. So first and foremost, every single household would have received the official government letter which contains the unique number on there. So every household should have had that. Those who don't have that, they're able to actually call the number that I mentioned earlier on or go onto the website, and no number will be released by ONS until you can verify the address that you're talking about or where you're phoning from. With regards to bank account details or any of the personal information like that, nobody should be visiting you at home and asking you for that kind of information. And I think this has been a question that has been put to us just last week where, you know, if somebody says, I'm finding it difficult to fill the form, but if you give me £20 or £25, I'll help you fill that form in. There is no such thing in the ONS with regards to helping anybody fill the forms in. And we haven't got any other agents who have employed to do that. Apart from after you receive your second letter, that is when they'll tell you that you'll be getting a visit from a census official, if you still haven't done that on the third time that you get it. And all of census officials would have the official government card and identification. If you feel that they knock on your door and you don't trust them for whatever reason, you don't have to actually speak to them about giving any information. You can call the number up and say, I've got somebody at my doorstep, and they'll be able to verify with you whether they are actually from census or not. Don't get me wrong, we're not debt collectors. We don't even want to get to the stage. We don't want to get to the stage of even sending somebody to knock on your door. We really are trying to do so much night and day to try and just get as many people to fill this in, so that once it's submitted, it's gone out of your head. And because the last thing anybody wants to do, and especially elderly people, to open a door to someone, who's on official yellow fluorescent jacket and, asking if you filled out your census form, and lockdown doesn't allow you to do that. So I think we're trying to really eliminate that. That is the last stage of doing anything, is to take that compliance issue. I mean, to be honest with you, history has shown us that by the time you get the third letter, you really do feel that you're going to have to do this before you get that final red letter.
Okay, no, so Sanjay, sorry, my question was more along the lines of people pretending to be ONS people. Will anyone be calling individuals and just saying, you know, like you get those fake phone calls where you get like National Crime Agency pretense numbers, oh, your NI number's been stolen, blah, blah, blah. Would someone be calling from the ONS? They wouldn't call, would they?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to make that very clear that ONS will not call anybody about the census. Okay. The only communication is that letter. Somebody asked me a question that, oh, I've filled out my census form, but can I have a copy of it so I know what I filled in? Well, again, that goes against data security. If you were able to have a PDF copy of something that you've submitted, and we're assuring you that that information is not going to go anywhere, so you won't get a copy of that either.
Right.
Once it's been submitted, it becomes anonymous as far as the data that we actually extract from that. So yeah, you should not be receiving any phone calls or any visits. And where there is a time when the visits will happen, you will be notified that the census officer will be coming.
Okay.
Sanjay, in terms of the last census, was there presumably there were fines in that last census as well. Was there a big amount of money collected, or just very small sums?
I think there were fines, and I think the way that it was implemented last time was that, you know, in anything, in any form of life, you always get some people who refuse to take part. They may not have a reason, or they may have a reason for not taking part. It's not because you've forgotten it, or you know, it's been put in one side, but you know, those who were taken to court and fined would have been those ones that just didn't want to do it for whatever reason that they wanted to. So, sure. But again, this time around is different, that it is mandatory. You see that, and I think that if we take it in that concept as well, that this data really is needed. Unless it's there, how on earth are we going to go? You know, we've just coming out of COVID, we're coming out of Brexit. We haven't even seen what the effects of that's going to be, because we went straight into the COVID-19 lockdown. So all this information is really important for governments to analyze as to where, you know, the deprivation of pockets are going to be across the country. So I'm not talking to you from my ONS hat on, but I'm just talking as an Indian, that I've seen how this works. I've used census to the best I could do. And I know that if all our communities did that, then you will see, and then we can't complain that we don't get anything.
Yep, agreed. Nirmal?
No, I think I'm done.
I've got one more. Yeah. You know, obviously, very interestingly, there aren't many questions relating to sporting and recreational facilities. You know, there is talk about planning for these facilities so that it encourages the community to stay healthy and fit. But there doesn't seem to be any questions in the census which are asking about, you know, whether there should be any sporting or recreational facilities available to people in their nearby vicinity where they live or whatever. Is this just a thing that's just been overlooked, or is it just something that it's just too much to ask?
No, and I totally agree with you. And I think this is where, if you look at all the way that government funding works, central government and our good friend Rishi Sunak would be giving all of the local authorities their share of the money. It is then up to the local authorities to be able to share that equally amongst the various communities. And that includes recreation and sport, because that is another very big factor in government policy, is the recreation and sport. But at the same time, it needs communities or charities or organizations to say, I want to build a five-a-side football indoor pitch in, I don't know, wherever I live, in Harrow or whatever. Then it's up to us as to be able to say, this is our project. This is what we want the funding for. So it's like anything, that you need to devise those projects, you need to devise those initiatives in order that the money that's been allocated can then be dispersed in that. The one thing I'll say as well, Ramit Bhai, is that if we don't claim that money that is allocated for the Indian community, for example, don't think it just sits there, because it will be taken by somebody else who can actually prove that they've got the community to be able to use that money for. And that happens consistently. That happens, you know, right across the board. We think that, oh, well, we must have a really large bank account now that the Indian community hasn't, you know, any of these resources. But, you know, it's not how it works, because they have to spend it each year. Whatever money is in the local authority, either they make a loss or they have a profit. But if they have a profit, it doesn't mean it gets carried forward to the next year.
Yeah, no, agreed. Thank you. I think I don't have any other questions, Nirmal, and I'm just going to close up. But before I close, obviously, on behalf of CAT8, I really would like to thank you, Sanjay, for a very, very clear presentation, clear answers, and a very helpful and useful background to the census. You know, a lot of people will get the census forms, but the background isn't there for many people. They just say, oh, I need to complete it, and that's the end of it. But for what you've told us today, it is actually very important. It is for our own selves. If we complete all this properly, then we will be able to get the services, etc., resources allocated to our needs. And this is one way of doing it. So everybody should make a very big effort to make sure that they fill the form in properly, make sure you tick all the boxes properly, and make sure you complete the census by the 21st if you can. Obviously, there is a little bit of leeway, but don't leave it till the last minute and then get the red letter or whatever it is. Please complete so that we're all we're there up at the top with our communities. Secondly, make sure that voluntary question about religion and so on is also answered, because whether you're a Hindu, whether you're Jain, whether you're Sikh, whatever it is, please make sure you complete that question and put other, if a category isn't up there, and put like other, for example, Jain, just put that in, because what it does, it will help all of us ultimately in the end. So do that. Finally, obviously, as I said before, this webinar will be recorded, will be available on our CAT8 Facebook and YouTube pages. Literally, I think Nirmal was mentioning that this will go on hopefully later tonight or first thing tomorrow. One more quick event to tell you about. There is the big Great Indian Money Show, the big show by iGlobal. Please register. It's free of charge. It's on the 26th and 27th of March. So if you go to iglobalnews.com, you should be able to register for free. And then you can see a lot of the webinars, etc., and ideas on different types of things about money and how to make best use of the money that you have yourself. That's it. Thank you again. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining tonight. Stay safe, be alert, and save lives. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.